Namo Namaha Bhavatam Sarvesham Hartam Swagatam. Welcome back to this channel Sanskrit Sopanam. I hope you are doing great. I'm also good. And continuing in our series Learning Sanskrit through Gita, today we will decode the 23rd shloka from the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And again, just like the shloka that we covered in the last video, this particular shloka also is very popular, is very often quoted in movies, in TV serials, in normal conversations, and it is again very easy to understand, both grammatical wise, Sanskrit grammar wise, and the spiritual, the philosophical context wise. So what is it and what we can learn from this shloka? Without wasting any more time, let's quickly dive in today's video. So this is the shloka that we'll decode today, and I'm sure almost every one of you may have heard or read this shloka. But anyways, let me go through the shloka once. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakah, na chainam kledyantyaapo, na shoshayati marutah. Okay, so this is a shloka, and this again here is the Sandhi Vichcheda of the shloka. So you can spot few sandhis here. So there is the Vriddhi Sandhi, na enam changing into nainam. And then here also you have the same sandhi happening, Vriddhi Sandhi. So cha enam changing into chainam. Okay, and then you can see a yana sandhi that is happening here. Kledyanti apaha. So this becomes kledyantyaapaha. Okay, this e and a changing into a ya, kledyantyaapaha. And then again there is a ukara sandhi that is causing this visarga to change into this o. So kledyantyaapo. And one more thing you can spot in this shloka is, once we have done the sandhi vichcheda, you can see there is just one sarvanama. So this is enam. So this is again all these three sarvanama, they are basically pointing towards a same namapada, towards a single main object, and it is very easy to guess that object. So we are talking about the self, the Atma, in all these previous shlokas that we are covering. So this enam is also referring to the soul, the Atma, the self. And then you can see a very similar structure, that na chindanti shastrani. So there is one action, one kriya that is happening here. Then na dahati pavakaha. There is another kriya that is happening here. Then na kledyanti apaha. So there is third kriya that is happening, and this is the fourth kriya, na shoshayati marutaha. Okay, so see how easy it is structure wise, that you have the object, here are all the object, and then you have four different kriya, chindanti, kledyanti, dahati, shoshayati, and this of course will be the subject who is doing that kriya. So shastrani, pavakaha, apaha, marutaha. So again a very basic structure, that you have a kriya, you have the subject, the karta who is doing that kriya, and you have the karma on which the kriya is being done. Okay, so this is all the information that we can directly get from the structure of the shloka once we have done the Sandhi Vichcheda. Okay, so these are all the sandhis. Again, all the sandhi detail, word by word breakdown, and the alternate words for each word in the shloka. Everything as usual is in the PDF file. Download the PDF file from the link in the description box. We'll just move on for the decoding of the shloka now. And I'm starting not with a Kriya Pada because we have multiple of Kriya Pada. We are rather starting with the main object, because this enam, which is implicitly referring to the self, the Atman. So this enam is the main object for all the kriyas that are happening in this shloka. This enam is coming, of course, from the Sarvanama Pratipadika, etad. This is the Pratipadika. Etad is used to again denote this. Okay, when we are pointing towards something that is closer to us, or we are pointing towards something that has been the object, that has been the main topic of discussion throughout these continuation shlokas. And this etad here is in the masculine gender. It is in the Pullinga form. Why Pullinga form? Because implicitly it is referring to the self, and self in Sanskrit is Atman. Okay, so this etad is implicitly referring to this Atman only, and this Atman is a Pullinga, it is a masculine gender Pratipadika. So the Sarvanam also is the masculine gender form. Okay, and as we have made it clear that this is the object of all the kriyas that are happening in the shloka. So it is an object, so it is in the Dutiya Vibhakti, it is in the second word case and singular, Ekvachanam. So etad in masculine gender, Dutiya Vibhakti Ekvachanam becomes enam. This is the form that we see in the shloka. Instead of using the Sarvanama, we could have directly used the main Namapada also. And the main Namapada is Atman. So we would have used the second Vibhakti, Dutiya Vibhakti, singular form of Atman, that is Atmanam. So I hope the main object of our shloka is clear, and if we'll move on. So I'm just prompting a question that what? Okay, this self, what about it? And what we get is enam na chindanti. And this here is the first kriya, first action that we see in the shloka, chindanti. And this chindanti is coming from the dhatu, the verb root chid. Chid dhatu means again to cut through or to incise into something, to penetrate into something, in that sense. What we say in Hindi, no, bhedana. So in that sense. And if we'll inquire about the subject, the karta of this kriya, So the karta here is shastrani. This shastrani, this of course is coming from the pratipadika shastra. Shastra simply means weapon. Okay. This shastra is a neuter gender. It is a napunsak lingam, neuter gender pratipadika. Shastrani, this here is in the form first case. Why first word case? Because this is the karta of this kriya. So of course first word case and plural, as you can see from the form. Shastra, shastre, shastrani, phalam, phale, phalani, in that sense. Okay, that the weapons, they do this kriya. And now we can get the form, this chindanti form also. That since the subject, the karta here is the plural, is the bahuvachanam. And this shastra is some third person thing. Okay, so this chid, this verb root here is of course in the third person form. Okay, some person, something does that action. So third person, and as we can see from here, that plural. So it is plural, it is bahuvachanam. And this here of course is the lat lakara. This of course is the normal present tense. So in these three properties, this chid changes into chindanti. And lastly, this preceding na here is of course negating the meaning of this verb, this action. And you see this na before every kriya. Okay, so all the actions are basically negated. That weapons cut through, but with this na, the weapons do not cut through in that sense. Okay, so I hope this entire thing is clear because the same structure will be followed for all the rest of the kriyas that are happening in the shloka. Okay, so you spot the karta, and as per the qualities of the karta, it is plural, it is dvivachana, it is single, ekvachanam. So as per that, you will have the form of the kriya also. Okay, shastrani, plural, so chindanti, again, the bahuvachanam form of the kriya. Okay, so I hope this is clear. The entire meaning becomes that enam shastrani na chindanti, that the weapons do not cut through the self. Basically implying that the weapons cannot cut through or penetrate or injure the self, the Atma within us. So that is the sense here. Because again, we are talking about the eternal nature of the self as compared to the limited, the finite nature of the physical body in that sense. In that comparison, we are doing this. And then if we'll move on, so again, we have the same object and we have some kriya, and I'll open the subject also. So the subject here is pavakaha. And this pavaka is of course coming from the pratipadika pavaka. And this pavaka, this is a synonym. This is one name for fire, agni, in that sense. Okay, it is a masculine gender. It is a pullingam pratipadika. So again, in prathama vibhakti ekvachanam, this is in ekvachanam, so it is pavakaha. Just as any other akaranta pullinga pratipadika will be Rama, Ramaha, Vriksha, Vrikshaha. So in that sense. Okay, and this karta, the fire, what does it do or what does it not do? So pavakaha na dahati. Dahati, this is our main kriya. This is coming from the root, the dhatu, dah. That means to burn. Okay, to scorch something, to burn something in that sense. So the fire here is the karta. So we have the third person, pavakaha. So as we saw, it is in the ekvachanam. So we have that singular and of course the lat lakar, the present tense. So a very basic form, patati patataha pathanti in that sense, dahati. Okay, so pavakaha dahati, the fire, it burns. But again with the preceding na, so the fire does not burn. And fire does not burn what? What is the object? So we know the object is enam. So enam pavakaha na dahati, that the fire does not burn the self. Or you can better read it as that the fire cannot burn the self, that it cannot burn the eternal, the immutable self, the Atma within us. Okay, so that is what we have here. Again, in the PDF, you will see, try to find out the synonyms for all these words. So pavakaha, you can replace it with agnihi, because very common word for fire, right? And then there can be multiple other words also for fire. Then you have this kriya, dahati. So dahati means to burn. I have replaced this dahati with bhasmi karoti. So this is a special kind of use. This is actually a case of a samasa. And actually what happens here is, suppose you want to say that the fire turned that thing into dust, into ash. So what is ash? Ash is denoted by this bhasma. Okay, that when something is burned down, this is what remains, bhasma. The ash is what remains, right? So if I want to say that something, it was not ash, it was not dust before, but now it has been made, it has been turned into dust. So when I want to convey this, that something that was not something before, but it has been made, it has been turned into something now. So for that we use this special provision in Sanskrit. And this provision is only used with three dhatu. We can either use it with kri dhatu, that means to do, or we can use it with bhu dhatu, that means to be. And similarly we can use it for as dhatu, that also means to be. And now if I am saying that pavakaha dahati, that the fire, it burns. So I am basically trying to say that the fire, it turns something into ash. So using this provision, what I do is with this pratipadika bhasma, the ash, that is the end result. I use that pratipadika, I give it a dirgha e swara, so bhasmi, and then I just place a verb, karoti, because it is a singular subject, pavakaha. So with pavakaha, I will use karoti, pavakaha karoti. The fire, it does. Fire, it does what? That fire, it does this, that it changes an object into ash. It turns an object into ash. Why? Because it burns it. So bhasmi karoti is basically conveying that only. Okay, so this use you will see a lot of places. So suppose we are making some sentence. No, we say when we are scared, our face, it turned white. So suppose I have to convey that the face turned white. So white, for white I can use this pratipadika shukla. That means white. And for face I can use this Sanskrit word anana. Anana means face. Okay. So suppose I want to say that the face, it turned white, it became white. Okay. So ananam bhavati. Now, bhu dhatu is to become. So ananam bhavati. That will mean that the face becomes. And face becomes white. It was not white before. Now it becomes white. It turned white. That it turned shukla. So I will combine these two things as shukli bhavati. Ananam shukli bhavati. And this will convey that the face turned white. And that is what I did here. That instead of saying dahati, in replacing this kriya dahati, I said that bhasmi karoti. That it turned into ash. Just simply conveying the same meaning, that it burnt. Okay, in that sense. So what samasa is this again? We don't need to dive down into that. Just you can notice these uses also somewhere in the shlokas in Sanskrit verses, and that is how it operates. You just give them a dirgha e swara. And the thing to note is you can only use it with either bhu dhatu, as dhatu, or kri dhatu. So shukli karoti, shukli bhavati, shukli bhavanti if lot of things are there, shukli kurvanti if the subjects are multiple. So just change that kriya as per the number of subject there are. Okay. So just some extra use, but again coming back to the shloka in hand, and if you'll move on, now again we have the same object, we have a kriya, and I will open the karta also. So we have enam apaha na kledayanti. So apaha, this apaha is coming from the pratipadika up. This is a very peculiar, ending with a pa. We don't see very often this kind of pratipadika. So this up pratipadika, this is a feminine gender. This is a strilingam pratipadika. And this means water. Okay, this means water. And this particular pratipadika, it only have plural form. It only have this bahuvachanam form in all the different vibhakti. So this apaha is of course first case. First case, why? Because this is the karta of this kriya. So that we know. So first case, prathama vibhakti, but bahuvachanam, the plural. Okay. So up, this changes into apaha. Okay. Saying the water does something to this self. What does it do? So na kledayanti. So kledayanti, this is our kriya. And this kriya pada, this is coming from the dhatu, the verb root klid. Klid dhatu means to become wet, to be wet, to become moist. So for this klid dhatu, we can already guess the form, that this is again the third person, and here it is plural because apaha, the subject is in plural, bahuvachanam. So this is also in plural, and this of course is the lat lakar, as all the rest we have seen so far. But now pay attention to something, that if I change this verb root using these three properties, whatever kriya pada I will get, so whatever kriya pada I will get, leave that, but the meaning that will become with this kriya pada is the water, it becomes wet. Okay, because this dhatu means to become wet, that you become wet yourself. The subject, the action happens on that subject itself. So if I simply use this verb root and apply these three properties, third person plural lat lakar, whatever kriya pada I will get along with this karta apaha, the sense will become that the water, it becomes wet. But I want to say that the water, it makes something wet, that the action is being caused onto something else. So for that we know that we modify this dhatu using a pratyaya, that is nich pratyaya. So I don't know how many of you could have guessed this point, but if you have guessed this point, that we are going to use a causative. This creates a causative verb, right? A verb that is caused onto someone else, something else. So for that sense, we modify the dhatu using this nich pratyaya. We have done it so many times before also. And we have often taken this simple example that pat, it becomes pathati, saha patati, the boy studies. But if I modify this pat dhatu using nich pratyaya, so the verb becomes saha pathyati. And pathyati means the boy makes someone study, or simply the boy teaches in that sense. And I have to convey that same sense here, that water, it makes, or in this case, na kledyanti. So it does not make the self wet. So I have to convey that. So I am modifying this dhatu using this nich pratyay, and then I am applying these three properties, third person plural lit lakar, and the form that I get is kledayanti. So we have to be careful about these things, how they are being used in the shloka, contextually, what is the use. Okay, because see what will happen. You will see this dhatu, klit dhatu, you will see these properties, third person plural lit lakar, you will go and check in the Ashtadhyayi dhatu patha, and you will not see this form. There will be some other form. The reason is, the kledayanti, the meaning here is, the action has been caused onto something else. So it has been modified using nich pratyay, and then you are getting a new set of forms. So that is why we have to be careful. Okay. Okay, that is the sense here. And if we'll move on. So the last point is very in contrast to this point. That instead of saying the self does not become wet, now we are saying that the self does not become dry. So we are using another dhatu, that is shoshiyati. This is a kriyapada. But anyways, first let us see the karta, marutaha. So this of course is coming from pratipadika maruta, and this maruta implies wind. Okay, and again it is a karta, so prathama vibhakti ekvachanam. Maruta becomes marutaha. Okay, that is a form. And what does the wind cannot do? So na shoshiyati. This shoshiyati is again coming from the dhatu shush dhatu. And again see the difference, that this shush dhatu, this means to be dry, to be dry, to become dry. Okay, so if I'll use this dhatu with the three properties, we are talking about marutaha. So it is a third person and singular as we saw, and latlakar present tense. So if I'll simply convert shush dhatu using these three properties, and then if I'll use it with marutaha, so the meaning will becomes the wind, it becomes dry. But I want to say that the wind, it makes it dry. So okay, so the action is caused. So again we are modifying this dhatu using the nich pratyay, the causative pratyay, nich pratyay. And once we have modified the dhatu using this pratyay, then we are applying these three properties, third person singular latlakar. The form that we get is shoshiyati. And now marutaha shoshiyati, that the wind makes it dry. And na shoshiyati, so the wind does not make it dry. Wind does not make what dry? So again the same object enam, that the wind does not make the self dry, or the wind cannot dry the self, cannot dry the atman in that sense. Okay, so I hope everything is clear. See again, shoshiyati. So if something is dry, so in Sanskrit we have a word shushka. So shushka, it signifies something that is dry. And suppose I want to replace this shoshiyati. So again we can use the same provision that we did with dahati. We replaced dahati with bhasmi karoti, to convert into ash. And same thing we can do here, that to make it dry, to convert it into dry. That marutaha shushki karoti. Marutaha shushki karoti. So the word for dry was shushk. I just gave it a dirgha e swara, and then I combined it with the appropriate kriyapada form. So shushki karoti. Marutaha shushki karoti. The wind makes something dry that was not dry before. And since it becomes a samasa, this entire word, so these are just joined together. These two words are joined together. Shushki karoti. Okay. So this is just some additional detail. But I hope everything is clear now. For synonym for marutaha, again very common synonym, vayuhu. So you can say vayuhu also in place of marutaha. Again keep on asking these questions to yourself. But now we are at the Anvay and the translation. So Krishna is again expanding on the nature of the self, the true nature of the self, the Atma. And he's saying that enam shastrani na chindanti, that the weapons do not. And as per the context we can read as cannot, that the weapons cannot cut through it. And pavakaha na dahati, the fire does not burn it. And apaha na kledyanti, the water cannot make it wet. And lastly, marutaha na shoshiyati, and nor wind can make it dry. Okay. So basically again Krishna is reinforcing the fact that whatever happens to this gross body, to this subtle body, to all this manifest universe, it is separate, and that does not have any effect on the true self, on the Brahman, on the Atman, because they are eternal, they are immutable, they are avyaya, they are ananta, asima. So he is again reinforcing on that point. But apart from this eternal nature of the self, we are also very cleverly hinting at a point that a thing or an object cannot affect something that is subtler than itself. So for example, I cannot take a sword and injure a stream of water. Why? Because compared to sword, the water is more subtle. And a similar example we can take is of fire and space. So fire, it can burn everything that is present in the space. But does it burn the space itself? No. Why? Because compared to the fire element, the space element is subtler. It is more subtle than fire. So that is the thing here. And the self, the Atman, the Brahman. So that is the cause of everything. So from that alone, everything has come out. So it is the most subtlest of the thing, of anything. It is the most subtlest element. So how can anything other than itself affect it? So that is what is being hinted here, that neither weapons can hurt it, nor water can moisten it, nor wind can dry it, because all these elements themselves are getting their nature, their ability from the self itself. The self is the most subtlest. It is the supreme, it is the highest truth. But having said this, the same thing is again expanded in the coming shloka also. What is it? We'll see when we'll decode that shloka. I hope grammar wise again everything was clear. Few additional points that we touch that were clear. And download that PDF file, go through it for your own practice purpose. And I hope all of you are also complementing all these things with the commentary on Bhagavad Gita, so that you get the full picture, the full philosophical teaching, the spiritual teaching that are hidden in all these shlokas. So I hope all these things are being done. I'll meet you in another video, in another shloka. Until then, stay awesome, stay happy, keep learning Sanskrit. Vayam punah milamaha. Dhanyawad.